We still want the fire. Oh, there we go. There we go. We now have fire.
Oh, man.
So the good news is we're the only thing standing between you guys and a pub crawl. So you finally got your heat, Andy. It's probably LED. It doesn't put off anything.
That's right.
We only have about 77 slides to get through, so that's why half the room's already left. They heard in advance. So first session you'll have that actually does not have slides. So we heard it good in the background. I am, as it says, David Stallings. I have to read off the screen because literally we made this title up last week, Executive Technology Advisor. So I'm leaving Miller in about 15 months, and Andy is my replacement. I was our CTO for about 3 years, and been at Miller 36 years, been in the industry 37, so kind of gives you an idea how long I was out of college before I came to Miller. Not long. Go ahead, Andy. Who are you?
I'm Andy Bowman. I'm the incoming CTO, but before that, I ran a business unit that was all low voltage technology at Miller. I think everybody asks, what does Miller specialize in? Well, we pretty much said anything with wire. There's an awful lot of stuff that goes on wire that's not electricity, and that's really kind of rolled into my group at some point. David was my boss when when Miller acquired my company. I started a company in 2003 called Site Secure, and we were a low voltage integrator that specialized in physical security. And I did that for about 14 or 15 years until, David and I had worked closely together for a couple years. We were second low bidder on a state project, and we were joking after action, why didn't we win this thing? Well, we have stacked margins. They mark up their work, mark up my work, and then he marks up my work when I work for him. So if we had just streamlined it a little bit, we could be more competitive. And it started out as a joke, and I think 3 months later, the acquisition was done, and then I was at Miller. So that's how I ended up at Miller Electric.
Great. Hi, everyone. I'm Michael Dorman, CEO at Cardinal Point Technologies. Proud to say this is our first week at Cardinal Point. So previous to that, was involved in the financial services and telecommunications space. That's where I met KP sitting behind me. And from there, I got into construction and real estate development, helped found and bring to market a company called Multivista that was acquired by Hexagon in 2016. I worked in various roles inside Hexagon, leading their building construction division for Leica Geosystems, and then more recently was one of the team leaders for our AEC industry space. So you saw some of my old colleagues in the audience this week as well. So just happy to be here and part of this conversation, and excited about where we're going with Cardinal Point.
So I want to kind of set the stage on what we're actually talking about here, EV marketplace. So to be clear, we're going to try and keep Peter from getting into the politics of it, because I pretty much support his point of view. But I'm a contractor, and we make money building things. So you know what? If the federal government's going to push you to buy something and I can make money off of it, I'm going to make money off of it. That's just the way it is. So kind of give you a scale of where we're at, though. EVs are, if you're on the West Coast, you see them pretty regular. If you're on the East Coast, and especially the Southeast, you don't see them very regular. They currently have 1% of the marketplace. I mean, there's 200 to 250 million vehicles on the road, and less than 1% is actually EV. There's 7,000 charging stations roughly in the country. $19 billion in revenue last year building out charging stations. To give you an idea of the scale, though, is you've got California and several other states. Again, Peter, don't get too excited. They're saying there's not going to be any internal combustion engines sold in their state. So if you take the 1% being sold right now as EVs, it's roughly 600 and something thousand vehicles last year. But there were 13.5 million vehicles sold in the US last year. So in the next 10 years, roughly, what they're saying is, we're going to flip that dynamic. Well, if there's $19 billion in construction going on right now related to charging stations, you can do the math. It's going to be a huge transition. And us as an electrical contractor, well, it's what we do. But why we're all here today and what we're after is really just input and advice. You want to help us in the electrical industry ramp up to handle this? It's quite ironic. We all talk about labor shortages and the federal government's issuing checks to put in EV charging stations, private industries issuing checks, and you're looking at an industry that's growing at 30 to 50% per year for the next 10 years. There's no manpower to put it in. So you'd think that we were going with this, everything we've heard today, or the last 2 days, integrated delivery of technology, integrated delivery of construction. But that's why we're here. It's not happening. These jobs are being rolled out in the oldest, we saw the picture yesterday, 200 years of home construction that's basically being done the same way. Guess what? The cool electrify America, let's go green, everything they're doing is using the same antiquated construction model that we've been using forever. We as a contractor hope to have influence in that, but that's part of why we're here, is to get input and insight from others as to how we can influence this market to go more pre-construction off-site, more streamlined processing. And then the further part of that is any of y'all that have dealt with building construction, and in Andy's case, intensively in the building automation and control side, that industry has been fragmented for 30, 40 years. It's a brand new industry putting out EV chargers, and guess what? They are making monitoring of those devices by manufacturer. They are not going with a standardized system. You cannot universally monitor those units, and that's protectionism by the manufacturers. I mean, we know what causes it. So we're looking for ideas, companies, investment, however you want to look at it. Long term, that's got to stop. I mean, it's just got to stop. There's units that have been in place for less than, say, 24 months, and they're having a 50% failure rate on them. And who's monitoring it, who's fixing it, who's going to maintain it long term? There's the whole eco-structure of that is not in place. So,
Well, to add to that,
huh?
Do the owners know that they're failing?
So yes and no. Some manufacturers, charge points, obviously the large, entity, and they know it, and they're actively trying to set up that maintenance side of it. It's just everything's moving so fast that they're literally running behind. That's all it amounts to.
well, and your question might be, who do you call, right? You pull up to a charging station and you plug in and it's just not coming on. There's no sticker that says, hey, if you're having problems, call this number. Who put it in?
I'm assuming you call AAA.
You'll call Spark Charge. Yeah.
See what a fire does for you? It gets people actually talking and hanging out. Now we just need a shot glass.
So the startup that needs to be is an open source manufacturer of a standardized charging station.
Well, ASME, they have like an open protocol for communication, and they list out, it's called OCCP, and it just kind of standardizes the protocol on the communication from the charger. But if the charging manufacturer doesn't enable that communication with a third-party software application, or doesn't require it as part of their rollout, it just doesn't get used.
I think another valid point to that is if it's not on a maintenance routine, right? And if it doesn't have some level of maintenance capability tied to that as well, right? So there's no one monitoring it, right? I go back to our days in telecommunications, and there's a service reliability of 99.999% that we had to have in order to have reliability to our customers, right? Well, we had to build things called network operations centers and things along those lines to monitor and maintain our networks. We're just not doing that in not only just EV stations, but across the building industry as a whole, right? So that creates the complexity of the problem right there. So I'll stop there and you finish.
For that? I'm sorry to keep interrupting you.
No.
That's what this is meant to be.
Yeah.
That's why we
We were
didn't do
hoping you would
PowerPoints.
interrupt.
That's why we didn't do PowerPoints on purpose.
Yeah, so say the manufacturer, they put it in, and maybe they know that some of them are failing, and maybe they don't. Maybe there's no number to call the
Right.
charger. But are there incentives for them to fix these things? or maintain them well, or is there incentives in just selling them and putting them out there?
Selling them, putting them out there.
That's right. Yeah, the incentive, the grants we were talking about, is to put them in. There's nothing else tied to
no
it on
follow-up
how are you going to
incentives.
maintain it, you know. I can't think of anything more frustrating than pulling up to a charging station with 10% of your battery left and then, oh, you plug in and it doesn't work. What do you do at that point? Or you pull up to a charging station and there's a diesel pickup truck parked there because it's the only parking spot left. Who's towing this guy? There's no,
That's
you know.
his truck, by the way.
Well,
I'll give you a real world example driving here. From the previous conversation, Raleigh is where I live, and Alex, I just got to say, if we build an ice rink here, they will come. Okay, they will happen. But no, I pulled into it was a Sheetz gas station and attached to the charge station, and the connection for the power was disconnected from the unit. Right, someone had ripped it out. Right, no one had been there to fix that. So those types of things is why the diesel truck parks in that spot, because they say, oh, that thing's not, it's bent over or hosed there, the cable's unconnected, that type of stuff.
So we've
Who
even,
makes money from the charging station?
Depends.
That's a complicated question.
yeah,
Yes,
it's a
it-
totally,
Yeah. So
Adaptable
there are
business
4
model.
pay stations. So you pull up, swipe a credit card or your app, and you pay. And they're making a profit off of that. There's many
Gas station.
traditional gas station model, yes.
Okay.
Many municipalities provide them for free in order to encourage the adoption. That's private, then there's, which are not units we work on as a contractor, but then there's also your private units in your homes, that type of environment. It's not an environment we actively work in. Ours are more fleet related and large corporate rollouts. But yeah, there's a variety.
Is there
And
a model in the multifamily industry that's putting them in?
So the-
Are landlords putting them in, or guys?
So I'm glad you brought that up, because that is a marketplace that we don't actively normally participate in, multifamily market, but from a charging station standpoint, we may. But most of the property developers on the multifamily environment are not, they don't even know how to address it, I think.
Like a grocery anchored retail complex, is this something that when they're developing that, they're purchasing these charging stations and adding them as an amenity on their property, but then hands off, they're not in control, or?
Yeah.
every possible model you
And
can
when
think
it's
of,
been
yes.
sold to them, are they not
Given the expectation, like, okay, you're purchasing this, it's now your asset, you have to then maintain it, or are they expecting the utility company, like, how is
They're expecting the
the manufacturer?
current, if they're added as amenities like that, there's normally a Electrify America or even Charge Point. There is a national entity supposed to be managing that, but it's not out.
And that's even 2 steps removed, right? Because you think of likes of Crescent Communities or Gray Star, these large multifamily builders, and there's a point of property management that goes into that aspect. And then they're subtracting out of their property management contract to go to the charge points to these guys to maintain that. So the multifamily developers kind of taking all right, put that 2 steps beyond me, right, in what they're doing.
Blown away, multifamily developers saying a lot of them aren't even doing this. Like, how do you not? I mean, you're like cutting off, I don't know, 8% of your possible customers, right?
And growing rapidly,
Yeah.
customer base. Yeah, that part, again, because we are predominantly on the commercial, industrial, and in many cases, fleet side, so the Amazon, Walmarts, et cetera, of the world. The multifamily side, you're right. If I was in that development world, I'd be like, okay, yeah, we got to have them everywhere, because it's an amenity.
Yeah.
I mean, you go back, know how far we go back, 20 years ago, Wi-Fi in an apartment complex is like, oh my gosh, only a few of those had them. Now it's like, if you don't have that, I'm not even gonna show up.
How much would it cost apartment complex to put, say, 3 chargers in? Like,
Depends on what kind of charger. You can, the one that you get when you buy the vehicle is a level 1 charger that you can plug into that outlet, and it takes, well, it takes 16 hours to charge your car. And then level 2, well, that, you're going to need a 30 to 50 amp circuit to be able to do that. And then level 3, the DC fast charger, you need the utility company to bring a new service to you.
Okay.
So,
let's say a good enough one. So the level 1, I can attest, is not worth it.
Right,
worthless.
Let's say level 2, it sounds good.
Yeah.
Put in 3 of those, like what is the basic cost, like rough estimation, and plus the, like,
what did they
usage
say? $20,000 a...
each?
Worst case, yeah.
Yeah, well, because
Total.
most of the time there's no spare circuits to put them in. You go to the lighting panel and the thing's full. Now you got a new panel. And if your service coming into the building can't support a new panel, now you need a new service. So you got a new electrical service, a new meter, a new permit, a new electrical panel, and then a whole lot of electrical circuits to get to the chargers. So that's like worst case scenario, but it's very frequent.
Worst case is Amazon. So this is where the EV market is moving so quickly that it's just fascinating to watch, and why we wanted to present it and really present, but at the same time just ask questions. Amazon, pretty much one of your smarter companies in the world. I think we have to all agree, though. Whether you like them or not, pretty smart folks over there. EV's been coming for a long time. Their distribution centers are not set up. I said they've already signed the contract to buy the trucks. The trucks are being made. They're on the way. Their distribution centers, where they will be charging, were built around traditional semis. The amount of electricity they need on this fleet level, level 3s, these are multi-million-dollar jobs at every site, let alone it's a logistics problem. So Amazon apparently has gotten officially big enough that they have some silos, whether they're going to admit it or not. So you have one portion of the company saying we're going green, we're going sustainable, they place the order, et cetera. It's funny as a vendor of theirs to watch, because you know every big company is going to do it. The logistics side that handles all the semis, all the distribution, everything is like, whoa, wait a minute, our parking lots are actually engineered and designed to support our system. Our system did not include charging these EV vehicles on site. These are semis. They go off site to get their fuel. So now Amazon's in this process of, in some cases, buying extra land because they didn't have it. I mean, they were a really smart company. They engineered down to the exact square footage they needed to do X. So some of these jobs, and that's part of the delivery question that we are just, I guess, presenting and struggling with, is the speed at which they want them done. The traditional model doesn't work. And yet the mindset is still out there. It's like, well, we'll hire an engineer and we'll buy a piece of property and we'll engineer this new substation and build it out over here. But the reality is they want it 60, 90, 120 days from now because the trucks are coming.
But isn't there like also a bigger like grid problem? I mean, in the same week, Gavin Newsom announced no more gas vehicles. He also said, please do not charge your electric vehicles.
The 1% that we have, the 1% of electric vehicles, and I'll give them credit.
Same week, right?
I give them credit. California's got 2.5%. Yeah, I mean, they are the predominant adopters, but yes.
It's the same week,
Yeah.
right?
And I didn't want to get into grid because we could be here all day on that one because that is just.
I mean, my question is like, if we could actually deploy, we invent a drone that drops these things in, whatever it is, right? Robots. We still have a massive infrastructure problem. That if
Have you tried to permit a 2,000 amp service at an Amazon? They want the job in, say, 120 days. The permitting process alone is 120 days.
Yeah. And that's if you've already coordinated with the utility. You tell them you want to put a 2,000 amp service in, and they look at their grid and go, yeah, we're going to need 9 months to build out the infrastructure to put in a substation to feed your, wow, we should have talked about this a year ago.
And that's one of the points.
And bookending that is this huge, backup of solar connection.
Yes.
Well, and in Florida we have a hurricane problem. And so this is a big concern for FDOT or Florida DOT is if we had a mass evacuation and if all these people out of the evacuation zone had to leave and they had EVs, could they get to a safe destination on a full charge?
No.
So, and so their next step is, well, where do we put these every 150 miles? Let's pick the rest areas. Well, you know what kind of electrical service you have at a rest area? It's for the hand dryer in the
It's a
bathroom
100 amp
is really the...
pole out back. It's
Right. So
Yeah,
they're faced with having to put in diesel generators in the parking lot to run the EV chargers. So, just the political ramifications of doing that is political suicide. To put a generator out back to be able to power the EVs just to get the EVs charged.
So these are at least like short-term problems, though. These are like decade and a half problems, and then long-term it's.
And he brought up a really good point as we were prepared for this about what's the future evolution of, green and electric vehicles really going to be, hydrogen fueled cars, right? So if we get 10 years down the road and EVs really aren't the future, and we're in a hydrogen so is it really with putting the infrastructure in to support that based on where we're going long term, right? So there's just a lot of complexity when it
And
comes
to, and to Rob's point, if we go with some microgrid technology and we power things locally, and then the need goes away.
Are you familiar with NEO, the big project in the Middle East? They're doing all hydrogen. All hydrogen.
I'm telling you, I was
And their whole
15 years
plan is
early.
like, you know, because they have lots of money, right? We're going to innovate hydrogen because we think that's the future. All the bus, everything, the entire infrastructure is all hydrogen. And they're going to innovate, like how to produce hydrogen, like the whole.
Right.
We'll have to
That was
change
our
it.
joke.
We'll change our topic to hydrogen now.
So on the long term, you talk about support and maintenance. What about the end life of this? Are you thinking about that as well? Do you have any play in that, being able to be a player in that case? Is the manufacturers being charging that upfront when they send that out?
Well, the weird part is like Miller's 92, 95-year history is mostly in the built environment. I think over 55% of our gross margin is made in the service industry. So we care more about the service of these things.
Right.
But yet we're everybody's favorite installer. You know, they want to call you up and say, go put these in, and we're going, time out. We want to service these. What's your plan for that? Oh, we're not worried about that yet.
So are the manufacturers, which is Schneider and all of folk right now,
Yeah.
are we putting that cost into that so that the customer doesn't get charged when you come take those out end of life?
No.
Do you know?
If we get to control the project, we want to design, build, maintain it. So we want that, you know, have a service life. What is a service life? Does anybody know what a service life is of a charger? What part's going to break first? Is there a maintenance schedule?
Well, we do know that now,
Well,
the communication side.
yeah, that's right.
That's why they don't know half of them aren't working, because that's the part that's failing most commonly.
Right. So we would like to build that in, you know, and I guess if it depends on if we're the front end of the project or the back end. Right now, we feel like we're on the back end because there's a lot of EV program managers out there that are responsible for rolling out charging stations. We're mostly in the fleet environment. So say General Motors says, I'm not going to ship any EVs to this dealership until the dealership puts in some EV charging stations. So there's a lot of dealerships going, we have to pay for this? I haven't even ordered a single vehicle and we have to pay for EV. And you look at how many, where do you put them? Do you put them in the maintenance bay? Do you put them in a showroom? Do you put them out front? How many do I need to have? And then that's every single car dealership in the country, regardless of the brand. Every one of them is going to build EV. And most of the dealerships don't have charging infrastructure. So they can even take delivery. What's the charge state of the car as it comes off the truck? 10% or 100%? I can guarantee you it's not 100%. So when it gets there, you got to be able to charge it. So there's a kind of a sequence of events happening that are all occurring simultaneously. So, you know, a program manager says, we want you to do these 50 dealerships in 3 months, 4 months. Like, how do you even do that? It's not just a workforce problem. You have to go survey it, find out if it's an electrical design project, then you got to get it permitted, then you got to put it in. That's if you can get the chargers. You know, you talk about supply chain problems. Most of them aren't made in America. You know, and Schneider, I think, pulled out of building them for a while, and now they're thinking about getting back in it, but yeah.
Yep.
So, but that's, you know, they're not ready today. You can't go buy one or order it from distribution. So, you know, there is a sequence of events problems. I think there's a perception problem on how fast you can put these in. The only ones you can put in really quickly are the ones that come in the trunk of the car that you have to plug into the outlet in the garage. But it's going to be a 16-hour charge, right?
I think mine's over 24 hours.
Is it?
Wow.
Can't go anywhere.
It's a hybrid at least, so
Yeah.
yeah.
Which one?
BMW X5?
Okay.
It's great, love it.
I got a new Jeep Wrangler, that's why I asked.
The one they put in the hotel, is that level 2 or level 3?
Yeah, level 2 probably.
Yeah.
Most
of
that's
your
the best
hotels.
balance between, you know, the level 3, it looks like you have an industrial transformer in the parking
Yeah.
lot in order to feed those.
Yeah.
Level 2 is, you know, most of the time you can put in a 240 volt panel and then feed 1 or 2 of them. I think
Is Tesla's charging network all internally maintained, or is that outsourced?
It's a combination, but, because we've installed many of them, but they try to maintain them themselves. But again, through a network of vendors, not Tesla themselves.
Any takeaways from their model that other dealers would follow? Or
I think that's part of the pain we're seeing is that all these other manufacturers are trying to catch up. because they know they can produce, the sheer numbers are they can produce more cars than Tesla can and outsell them in short order. Problem is they haven't built the infrastructure to support it yet.
Right.
And it's a multiplier of, you got Tesla selling, is it 300,000 or 260,000 last quarter? And then the other manufacturers coming online, they'll be selling 4, 5, 6, 10x of that, as everybody likes to keep saying.
Slightly different question.
Yes.
What are we doing with all these batteries once they're
Great question.
Well, there is a lot of money being pumped into how to recycle them,
Yeah.
but
Redwood materials?
I haven't seen a company actually say we can do it yet.
But it's also like a lot of nasty chemicals.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
I'm going to do a shout out for another Worcester, Massachusetts company.
Yeah.
They've got what they call now, it's called battery resources. They claim that their lithium is from recycled batteries is better quality than the stuff in mine.
Right.
Those are broad claims that they're making, but they haven't been able to prove that. Otherwise, that would have taken a hold of the market. Right? Like, yeah, like Tesla's invested tons of money into a private company that's doing the same thing in California, right? Like they built like huge million-dollar factories and still haven't been able to like actually truly recycle lithium to make it.
This isn't my space, but okay.
Yeah.
It's a fun topic.
Way to
I mean,
go,
we could just
KP, you got
on
them
and on.
fighting over here, huh? And Peter's not involved.
It's the fire.
So what you're saying is I should not trade my gas-powered Wrangler for the electric.
I love mine, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, okay, I'm a car nut. Okay, let's be very clear on this. That's why I didn't want to get into the politics part of it. I had a series of Dodge Hellcats, so I'm a car nut. I got the Wrangler because I always wanted one, and it's 370 horsepower and 480 foot-pounds of torque. So it's the first Wrangler that I'm like, well, it's got a decent amount of power, other than the 392, which is like a death machine in my opinion. So, but no, I still wouldn't trade. I just happen to think it was
He's the one
pretty
who
neat.
picked the topic.
Play with it, pull it apart.
But the best part is you don't have to plug it in.
No, I do not.
Yeah. So the hybrid helps a lot with that regard, but
It is, if you, 30 miles per gallon so far, total.
on pavement,
That's true.
he hasn't taken it off.
Hey, I got 4 acres. I drive all around it.
Well, there's a lot of
That
spin-off
counts.
conversations, related to the EVs. One of the things was brought up yesterday was DAS, distributed antenna systems, and it's kind of we do a lot of parking technology in my division, and I can't tell you how many phone calls we get from the electrical guys that install these things in a parking garage, and they only have a cellular card in them to communicate on the pay, right? So you got people pulling in to charge. It's a pay, they've got a credit card, but the authentication of the credit card transaction never happens, so the charging station never turns on. So you got people parked in a parking garage. The parking manager or the garage owner paid, I don't know how many hundreds of thousands of dollars to put these things in as a revenue generator, and can't generate revenue because the manufacturer they picked only put a Verizon cell card in there. Never tested the garage to say, hey, how's my cell signal? How's it going to work? And for them, and you talk to the manufacturer and they're so short-sighted, they go, well, we don't want complexity. We want it stupid, simple. We want to ship it to the guy and you put it in and everything works. Well,
What's the opportunity? If I'm a real estate developer or a community, is this a different, if I invest in having solid EV infrastructure, is that a differentiated amenity? Is it, hey, maybe I'll attract, people will live in my community and I can charge higher rent? I mean, with every problem.
I think right now,
Capitalism, we'll figure it out.
yeah, I think there's an opportunity currently. It's an opportunity as a property owner to install them and make it an amenity and attraction. But very shortly, and I say shortly in long-term sense, 8 to 10 years, it's going to be a requirement. If you don't have it there, then you're losing clients.
The challenge there is, right, that the largest challenge there is that multifamily specifically, let's say, right, amenities are temporary. They're designed to be temporary use, right? So you go to the gym, you're walking out of the gym, right? You're physically taking yourself and then moving yourself out.
Right.
The problem with electrical charging in multifamily is I'm at home, I'm parking my car, I'm at home for the night.
Yep.
I'm not temporarily coming back in 3 hours after it's fully charged
Yep.
to move my car to another
That-
stop.
that is
Whereas
called
the
EV
restaurant
etiquette.
retail, because it's right? So I'm going to leave this retail establishment. So multifamily, like the amenity doesn't make sense until they can deploy 300 chargers because they have 600 units and they need
Right.
50%. But then the power draw, like, is absurd.
Insane.
right?
Absurd.
So I don't see the multifamily angle ever working as a true amenity for EVs.
Agree with that. They're sticking ahead to develop
Revenue
in
stream.
front of their buildings so that they can pull out of the home spot.
Charges at the same time, absolutely.
Sure, but that's still relying on people to
No,
move themselves from that.
No, it's not. You'll have more level 2 charging stations than you'll have.
Or using timing the charge.
Yes, yes.
I mean,
Yeah.
have to book themselves into the gym, right?
No.
No, some do. So, but apartments today don't have gas stations, so. So the model has to be they drive to a quick charge, level 3. It has to be fast enough, it's not so much different.
Yeah, I have a couple developers that tested this out, and they put charging stations in front of their complex, right, instead of all the parking garages and all that type of stuff. And it worked just like that. And you had people from the outside stop and pulling in the parking spot, charging their cars, leaving, right? So all of a sudden, they became a fuel station for outside people that weren't tenants. So they completely VD'd it out of all their projects.
We'll never get it permitted to allow people outside the
Yep.
apartment complex to come charge, because that becomes the different commercial use. The government's a little more.
Yeah, it's just what was happening, right?
Yes.
That's what I'm
People
saying.
would do it, but they broke the rules.
Yeah.
So there's a company called Spark Charge that is like the AAA for battery charging. And so they have these modular array of battery storage that's DC fast charging, and you subscribe to charging as a service. So it's almost like a timeshare for charging. They come to you, plug into your car, you don't even have to be there, plug into your car and charge your car for you. So they just drive around and charge vehicles. So that multifamily thing is a big deal for them. Yeah.
Well, so we laugh, but Cummins is, back to KP's point, Cummins is working on a hydrogen fuel cell charging truck. And that's what it does. It runs around and charges EVs.
So that everything's an opportunity. That particular company is not operating everywhere, but I think it's a Boston company, and they just, the fast charging is DC to DC. There's no inversion between AC and DC. It's just as big as the pipe you can get between battery to battery. But for them, it's all modular. These things stack up. They pull them out, plug into your car, and you can be in the office, you can be in the grocery store. You subscribe for how many charges a month you want. And it's almost idiot-proof for a multi-family scenario, because now you don't have to lobby with the property owner or the landlord or the HOA to put in 1, 2, 3, 4, whether it's assigned parking, not assigned parking. Do you get preferred parking if you've got a charger? Well, the charger is going to be closest to the electrical infrastructure, yada, yada. But the point is, this makes it mobile, and they bring it to you wherever you are, but they're not everywhere yet. And I think they are.
Franchise or company, or how are they expanding?
I don't know. It's called Spark Charge.
Spark Charge.
Yeah, Spark Charge. I believe it originated in the Boston area. And yeah.
Welcome back.
Matt Willis, everybody.
I love it. So you're a subscriber then, is what you're telling me.
There is a specific company called Zeal that is selling EV chargers just to multifamily, just to properties, and they're trying to create a full vertically integrated product experience. So I think there were some questions like, how is multifamily? Like there are startups that are trying to solve that problem.
But still, are they just selling the device and then walking away? Or
No. So I have a few multifamilies in New York City. By code, we're required to bring in EV chargers. And we charge for charging.
You charge the tenants.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's like
Like an app or
Yep.
something like that.
Just like a gas station.
And we make money off it now. It's profitable.
All the incentives.
Well, the other incentive too is the multifamily. There's a there's a price share, profit share with the multifamily property too. So they're incentivized to keep them up and running, to call the service provider, and et cetera. And it seems that, I mean, it's all about aligning the incentives. I think that's like
Right.
where we're getting stuck on some of these dilemmas. It's like, how do we align incentives across this entirely new space, integrating with physical infrastructure that doesn't quite exist yet, et cetera, right? But like, fix the incentives and you fix everything.
Right.
Well, and codes and ordinances are starting to require, they will not permit a new build unless it has X many EV charging stations per permitted parking space, right? So there's a ratio. They permit 50 spots, but 10%'s got to be EV. And so they won't even permit the building unless there's a plan for EV. At least that forces that conversation all the way during the design, so you can design the electrical infrastructure to support that. So I think that's going to be driven on the local level, not on the federal level, but at least on the local level, that they're going to require it as part of, building permits now. And even things that we would normally consider amenities won't become amenities anymore. They'll be part of the local building code. And they're going to start to mandate where that goes in and how it goes in. But right now, it's still the wild, wild west,
I
for
knew
us.
somebody would say that eventually. I have it in my notes.
I got boots on, so that's talking about
37 years ago, when they divested the Bell companies, that's when I came out of college, and it was like connecting computers and telephones was the wild, wild west. Been in that kind of integration networking side of the industry the entire time. This is really one of the first times I've seen something in the construction world where I go, dude, this is what we came out in the 80s. This is wild, wild west. Manufacturers going in 10 different directions, new startups, and it, for us, the reason why we like and wanted to talk about it is we build stuff. That's what we do. Yes, we want to, we've engaged with Shadow Ventures, we've engaged with several other data analytics companies because we want to stay on the cutting edge of construction. But at our core, we've got 3,200 electricians to keep employed and keep growing. And so that's what we want is feedback and ideas and interest in that market space, because it is the fastest growing market space for us by far.
And what of the multifamily?
No, ours again is predominantly large fleet and then the auto manufacturers. So think larger quantities, larger chargers in a confined environment.
And fleet is very predictable. Like they call it last mile. You leave the distribution facility, you come back to the distribution. You know what that route is. It's pretty static. Each truck drives pretty much within probably 10% the same mileage every day. Whereas long haul truckers, who knows? So that distribution fleet, that last mile fleet, is the easiest one to electrify because it's got a very predictable range. And so that's where we concentrate that, and car dealerships, because it's usually a program managed by a national company. So we're not doing one at a time, we're doing 200 at a time. It's a project management nightmare, but at least you're committed to doing 200, you're not committed to doing 2.
Have you ever spoken to any car rental companies?
There's a yellow one that committed to
It
buying.
runs a lot of commercials.
Yeah. Well, they committed to buying how many? 200,000?
Yeah, but they ran the commercial before they even signed the order.
I know. Yeah.
Yeah. First
So-
time we rented one, all they had was at the kiosk, they had a 110.
110.
Well, and
Again.
then where are you going? You're going from there to a couple of business calls and then the hotel. And there's 2 at the hotel, and they're both used. And to your point, they turned in for the night. Their car's done charging, but they're not going to move their car, so you can park there. So now you got to go to Target a mile and a half away and then Uber back to the hotel.
My favorite charging stations I've found so far, and EV etiquette, airports. So I pull into the parking garage. I did it Tuesday or Wednesday. There's 3 charging stations, so I'm going to be gone for 3 days. Can I plug in? I mean, is that acceptable? I mean, my Jeep happens to charge on a level 2 in like an hour and a half. I mean, I don't have to be there long, but I'm just going to leave it plugged in for 3 days. I haven't actually used it because I feel odd leaving my Jeep just sitting there.
Have you seen in Seattle, the bus networks, at each bus stop, it's like, they drive.
Your favorite stool?
That's my next favorite conversation is inductive charging, like your iPhone. And there's 2 or 3 companies doing that.
Each bus stop.
Yeah.
Inductive charging.
They call it opportunity charging. So if you put them at opportunistic parts along that route, it's a fun curve to see how it extends the range because they're charging, 4 or 5% at 10-minute intervals or whatever it is. And so they can extend the range of that fleet by, I don't know, 30% just by putting in these inductive charge points. And then, you know, there is pavement design going in right now. They've got a test track in Polk County, Florida that FDOT is participating in, to where they actually will do inductive charging as part of the roadway, which blows my mind. Because right now there's no commercial, I guess, retail sold EVs that are capable of inductive charging.
Right.
But they're trying to get the roadway ahead of it. Sounds great in concept, but we don't do a good job of maintaining our roads to begin with, so I can imagine what this is going to do to them.
So let me ask you, for a model that you go install, invest in, install that in those multifamily or some of those target segments that you talked about, and take on the ownership of the payments, right?
Yeah.
Some way that benefits the property owner or whatever. Is that something you looked into as well?
That is it's totally outside of my role and responsibility at the company, but it's one of my favorite things because I'm
not
an engineer.
anymore.
Kind of.
So it was like 3 days ago.
So like our EV team, like this whole department, all they can do, they're so busy right now just putting these things in, they don't have to look strategically at what is the opportunity. But you know, it is a lot like the ESCO companies that would come in and they would install LED lighting to, you know, and take the rebate of the savings to invest in other technologies, and it was a performance contract, right? So that same model exists in the charging world, but you have to know specifically the rate that the utility is going to charge you.
Yeah.
And what we've learned from kind of researching this is that we're now in competition with the Duke Energies and the Georgia Power corporations because they want to control the rate schedule to make it, I guess, more profitable for them to be the installing company and the management company. So they're really trying to tweak everything to favor themselves. So now they're in competition with us. So really the only way to control that destiny is to microgrid it. Generate it on site with alternate energy,
Yep.
battery store it, and then just do a grid tie, a pay-as-you-go type scenario, and a worst-case scenario. You know, a 5-day blackout, whatever it is, and that you're not having to buy from the utility unless it's absolutely required. But in that situation, there's a lot of infrastructure companies that will pay to do that, and they have a very predictable, you know, rate of return if they know how many charging events are occurring. And there's really no way to know that because we're not collecting this data. The people that are collecting the data are the charge points. Well, they want to bundle you into their ecosystem. They're not going to give you that data. And that goes back to this whole, I guess, ecosystem problem of not sharing the data. You know, and that's really where we need to get that information in order to find out, is there a financial return on that? We do a lot of parking technology, and the parking companies want to put these in the parking lots, but they have no idea how long it's going to take to pay for itself. You know, so they've done it as a trial and error in Atlanta. They put in Peachtree Corners, or one of those locations. They put in one of the parking managers' labs, and they did it as a pilot just so they could start collecting data. And they've determined that it would have like a 15-year rate of return on the investment at the current charging rate. But we know more people are going to be driving EVs,
Right.
and you know, but without having that fixed data, you're not going to get that guaranteed investment of people going in. Yep, I'll do this for you. You just have no way to determine what that revenue stream is going to be.
Yeah, they got to understand the speed to, I brought this up to these guys, speed to relevancy, right? Is it relevant? Like, are we getting data so we can make decisions in a real fast way to determine is what we're doing relevant or not, right? And the more that the manufacturers are locking down the data, the more they're putting an obstacle in front of themselves and the rest of the marketplace to actually achieve that type of goal, right? So I kind of just gave you the mission statement for Cardinal Point Technologies in that sentence, but in the end, it's really about how do we open up these data systems so we can get relevancy in our minds and be able to make smarter decisions, how we plan, and get that feedback loop going so that we can maintain these stations, do those types of things. So
Wrap up.
We'll do that. Yeah.
So one last thought. We actually invest in a Jacksonville company called Urban SDK, to your point, data sets.
Yep.
And their specialty is actually urban traffic flow and feedback for design, development, et cetera. We're working with them to combine what data sets we can find. So all of Tesla's charging stations, all these things are identified. You can get on an app, find it in a heartbeat. So we're combining those data sets, and I'm throwing this out there for anybody that's in that multifamily or is going to look at doing any charging rollouts, because we're aggregating all that data with the traffic flow so that we can then predict for property owners, you don't need 20 here because nobody goes here. But we've got this area of town where there's 50 cars sitting at, and you need to put charging stations there. So just a FYI plug there for our own selves. That's it. Beer time.
Here's your beer.